The night sky above the Predator Valley glowed with the faint silver of two moons, and the restless wind carried the scent of soil and stone across the great cliffs and the forest that spread far into the horizon. The tribe of hunters rested in their dens built from bone and stone, while their young cubs played close to the fires, their laughter rising like sparks into the dark sky. But when the sun rose in the morning and light spread across the jagged peaks, the laughter was gone and silence fell heavy across the land. The mothers woke first, searching the dens where the cubs should have slept, but the nests were empty, the blankets torn, and the ground cold with no sign of warmth. The fathers rushed from the hunting grounds, their voices echoing across the valley, calling for the young, but no cries came back, only the low hum of the wind rolling across the cliffs. The tribe gathered in the center of the settlement, their sharp eyes scanning the forest edge, their ears twitching for a sound. But there was nothing, not a single track in the dirt, not a claw mark on the stone, not even the faintest trail of scent to follow. Fear spread quickly through the tribe, for the cubs were not just young, they were the heart of the predators, the promise of future hunts, the carriers of the clan bloodline. And without them the tribe was broken. The old hunters remembered tales of rival clans who would steal young in secret wars fought in the shadows. But even those old stories spoke of broken branches, trails of blood, or sounds in the night. This time there was nothing at all. The elder of the tribe, a scarred beast with fur grayed by many battles, raised his voice in the circle, his deep growl rolling like thunder. He spoke of omens of curses from the stars, of punishments given by forgotten gods. The tribe listened with bowed heads, for the elder carried the wisdom of many seasons. But fear made his words heavy, and the mothers wailed while the fathers sharpened their blades. A group of hunters was sent into the forest, their bodies moving silent and swift through the trees. They searched every hollow, every cave, every stream bed, but the forest gave them no answer. The soil was clean, the rivers were clear, the caves were empty. It was as if the cubs had been lifted into the air and carried away by a hand unseen. Night fell again, and still the cubs did not return. Fires were lit across the valley, the glow casting long shadows on the cliffs. The tribe roared their grief into the sky, their voices carrying far beyond the mountains. But no echo of cub voices returned. The silence grew louder with every hour, until it pressed on every heart like a weight. Some whispered that the humans had taken them, the strange ones from beyond the stars, who walked soft and spoke strange words, though no human had been seen near the valley. Some whispered that rival clans had made a pact with dark powers, though no claw mark told the tale. Some whispered of shadows that walked between worlds and steal the innocent in the night. The whispers grew louder, feeding the fear that crawled through every den. On the third morning the elder gathered the tribe again, his voice sharp with anger. He declared that war would come, war against those who dared to touch the bloodline, war against shadows or spirits or rivals, no matter the cost. But deep inside every heart there was doubt. For how do you fight an enemy that leaves no trace? How do you strike back at nothing? Far beyond the cliffs, on the cold black edge of the sky, silent machines watched the valley, eyes of glass and metal following every movement of the predators. Their signals traveled across space, carrying the tale of the vanishing to the humans, who watched from above. The humans knew something the predators did not. The cubs were not lost to rival clans, nor to forgotten gods. They were stolen by hands that had done this before on other worlds and other nights, and the humans were already moving. But in the valley the predators only saw silence. They sharpened claws, they gathered weapons, they roared to the sky in grief. And raged. The mothers searched the forest again and again, until their paws bled on the stones. The fathers swore oaths of blood and vengeance, though they had no target for their fury. The cubs were gone. The valley echoed with emptiness, and every fire burned low with sorrow. Yet in the stillness of night, when the stars shone sharp above the cliffs, one small cub toy lay half buried in the dust, a simple bone carved into the shape of a beast. The mothers held it close, their tears falling heavy. The fathers clenched their claws tighter. The elder raised his eyes to the sky and whispered that the bloodline would not be broken. The tribe would rise, the cubs would return, for predators never surrender, and no shadow could erase their kind. The valley waited, and the moons turned above, while silence stretched into the hearts of every hunter, and the question remained who had taken the cubs, and why had they left nothing behind. High above the Predator Valley, far beyond the reach of their eyes, the humans kept their vigil in the cold silence of orbit. Their ships floated like shadows against the glittering stars. Their machines watched every movement, every fire, every roar that rose from the cliffs below, and their hearts grew heavy, for they understood What had happened, they had seen it before on other worlds, where the innocent were stolen, in the night, by hands that cared nothing for life. The humans were not conquerors in this sky. They had not come to rule the predators, or to claim their land. Their purpose was different, quiet, and heavy with responsibility. They believed that every child, no matter the world, was sacred, and to harm a child was the greatest sin in the eyes of humanity. And when the reports came from their machines that the predator cubs had vanished without trace, the humans knew at once that danger had returned to this corner of the stars. Inside the command deck of the largest ship, the leader of the human watch stood silent, his gaze fixed on the glowing images of the valley below. His name carried weight among his people, not because of rank alone, but because he had fought the slavers before, and he had seen the cages filled with children of many species. He remembered the cries that haunted his nights, the cries of young voices calling for help, and he swore long ago that he would never allow it again. Beside him, younger officers spoke with urgency, their voices low, but burning with anger. They spoke of shadows that take children. They spoke of the insect creatures that had stolen before from other worlds, leaving sorrow behind and fear that never healed. One officer demanded immediate action, to strike fast and strong. Another warned that moving without proof would only drive the predators to turn on the humans in suspicion. The leader raised his hand in silence. He knew that action must be taken, but it must be taken with care. The predators below already trembled with rage and grief. Their claws were sharp, their tempers hot, their pride unbroken. If the humans revealed themselves too soon, the predators might see them as thieves rather than allies. Yet, to wait too long was also danger, for every moment that passed, the cubs were carried farther away into the grip of monsters who would sell them as slaves, or worse, the leader felt the weight of time pressing hard upon him. In the observation room, a young human soldier stared at the screen where the predators searched the forest again, and again he saw the mothers clawing at the soil. He saw the father sharpening blades. He saw the elder raising his face to the sky and roaring his vow of vengeance. The soldier clenched his fists and whispered that they cannot be left alone, for no parent should face such loss without hope. Another soldier answered that humans have always carried the duty to protect not just their own, but all who are weak and innocent. In the mess hall, whispers spread among the human crew. They asked why they risked their lives for people who would never thank them, who might even attack them in fear. But another voice rose above the whispers and reminded them that humanity was forged through fire and sorrow, that on Earth long ago humans had also lost children to war, to hunger, to cruelty, and they had sworn that never again would they look away when children cried for help. The room fell silent, and every eye burned with the same resolve. Back in the valley below, the predators held another council. Their voices rose like storms. Some demanded war against rival clans. Some demanded a hunt into the mountains. Some even spoke of sacrificing to the old gods in hopes of mercy. But none of their words brought back the cubs, and despair deepened like a wound unseen. The humans, watching, knew that the predators stood on the edge of madness, and if left alone, their rage would consume them, and their young would remain lost. The leader of the humans called his council together inside the command deck. The air was tense, heavy with the weight of choice. He spoke slowly, his voice carrying the authority of memory. He reminded them of the world of Leora, where they had found cages filled with children of 3 different species. He reminded them of the Battle of Arios, where slavers had burned villages to ash, and he reminded them of the vow taken by every human who had survived those wars, that no child would be abandoned, no matter the cost. The council agreed, though some voices trembled with fear of what the predators might do if they saw humans walking into their valley. Yet the vow was stronger than fear. The humans would move, but with caution. They would reveal themselves not as enemies, not as conquerors, but as watchers and protectors. They would show the predators that they came not for land or power, but for the cubs and for justice. The first team was chosen carefully, not the strongest soldiers with heavy weapons, but those who carried calm eyes and steady voices. The humans knew that the first meeting must not be a clash of claws and steel, but a moment of fragile trust. They armed themselves with scanners, with maps, with quiet strength, and with the promise of humanity itself. Then they entered their small vessel and descended into the sky toward the valley. As the ship cut through the clouds, the predators looked up with fury and fear. Their roars echoed across the cliffs, for they knew the shape of this craft. They had seen humans before in the distance, and they did not trust them. The mothers screamed that humans had stolen the cubs. The fathers raised their blades. The elder himself narrowed his eyes and prepared to command the attack. But the human leader stepped down first, his armor plain, his hands open, his voice calm. He spoke words that were simple and heavy with truth. He told them that the cubs had been taken by shadows, not by humans. He told them that humans had seen this before, and that the same monsters, who had stolen from other worlds, had now come for the predators. And he told them that if the predators rushed blindly into the dark, they would lose everything, but if they stood together, there was still hope. The predators growled their rage loud and sharp, but they listened, for though they hated the humans, they hated the thought of losing their young. Even more, the elder asked why humans would risk themselves for cubs, not of their blood. The human leader answered with words that carried the fire of his people, because they are children, and children must come home. The valley fell silent, the flames crackled, the wind carried the scent of stone, and sorrow. The predators looked into the eyes of the humans, and for the first time, they saw not weakness, but something deeper, something fierce and unbreakable. The humans did not carry claws or fangs, but they carried a strength that burned like the heart of a star. That night the predators allowed the humans to remain, not as friends, not yet as allies, but as watchers in the dark. The fires burned through the long hours. The mothers still wept, the fathers still sharpened blades, but in their hearts a small ember of hope began to glow, for they sensed that these strange beings, who came from the stars, might hold the key to finding the cubs and bringing them home. And high above the valley, in the cold silence of space, other human ships moved into place, ready to strike when the time was right. For humanity had made its vow, and the vow was unbreakable. No child would be left behind. The next morning dawned with a red sky that painted the cliffs in fire and shadow. The predators gathered once more around the valley circle, their claws scraping against stone, their eyes hard and searching. The humans stood nearby, silent but watchful. The night had been long filled with restless cries and whispers, yet at first light the hunters of the tribe had returned from the forest with new signs, strange marks that chilled the heart of every parent. The hunters spoke of broken branches deep in the northern woods, branches too thick for a cub to break. They spoke of a trail of dark blood, not from a predator, not from a human, but from something larger, something alien. They showed the tribe stones with long scratches carved into them, scratches too wide for their own claws and too sharp for natural rock. The predators roared in fury, their voices echoing across the mountains as they declared that their cubs had been taken by monsters, not by rival clans, not by spirits, but by something far worse. The mothers clung to each other, their eyes wide with terror. The fathers struck the ground with their blades and demanded war. The elder lifted his hands, and silence spread through the circle. He growled that these signs meant the cubs had been carried into a trap, for whoever had taken them wanted the predators to follow the trail. They wanted the tribe to rush into the forest with rage in their hearts and no plan in their minds. The elder warned that such anger would lead to death, and the bloodline would be lost forever. The humans listened, and they knew the elder spoke truth, for they had seen the same pattern on other worlds. They had seen how the slavers laid out their traps, leaving signs of struggle, leaving drops of blood, leading hunters into caves or canyons, where they would be surrounded and destroyed. The humans had fought these monsters before, and they knew the cruelty of their design. One of the human officers spoke to the predators, his voice steady and calm. He said that if they followed the trail now with only claws and rage, they would never see their cubs again. The predators growled with suspicion, their eyes narrowing at the humans. One of the younger warriors shouted that humans spoke lies, that humans wanted to delay them, so the cubs would be lost forever. Others hissed in agreement, their anger rising like fire. But the elder raised his hand again and told them to listen, for even in their rage the truth of the human words burned clear. The trail was too clean, too simple. It called for hunters to rush into it like prey. The elder asked the humans how they knew of such things, and the leader of the humans stepped forward, his eyes burning with memory. He told them of worlds where children had been stolen from the arms of their parents. He told them of canyons filled with bones of those who rushed into traps. He told them of ships that carried cages across the stars, filled with young from many species. The predators listened, their rage shifting to dread, for the human spoke with the voice of one who had seen such horror, and not with the voice of a liar. The elder growled softly and asked what humans would do now if the cubs were their own. The human leader answered without pause. He said they would not follow the trail blindly. They would study it. They would track the signs from the sky and from the ground. They would find where the enemy hides, and they would strike with precision, not with rage. He said the cubs still lived, for the monsters who stole them always kept their captives alive Until the cages were filled, he said there was time, but only if they acted with wisdom, not only with fury. The predators looked to their elder. The mothers begged for speed. The fathers begged for vengeance. The elder stood silent, his mind torn between pride and fear. Then at last he spoke, his voice deep and heavy with decision. He declared that the tribe would listen to the humans, not as masters, not as friends, but as guides. For now, for the lives of the cubs were worth more than pride. The tribe growled in protest, but none dared defy him. The humans nodded, their faces grim and ready for what must come. Together the humans and predators set out toward the forest. The humans carried scanners and maps, their eyes sharp for signals. The predators moved like shadows, their claws ready, their ears sharp for danger. Every step felt heavy with the weight of the unknown, for the trail was wide open, yet no enemy appeared. The broken branches looked too clean, the blood drops too carefully placed. It was as if an invisible hand had painted the path for them. Hours passed as they followed the signs deeper into the forest. The trees grew taller, the shadows darker, the air heavy with silence. Then the humans halted, their scanners humming with strange signals. The leader raised his hand and whispered that the enemy was near, not in front of them, but around them, high on the cliffs and hidden in the shadows. The predators froze, their hearts pounding. The elder growled that the trap was here and that the cubs were being used as bait. Suddenly a predator mother cried out, for she had seen something small half hidden in the brush. It was a piece of cloth torn from a cub nest, the smell of her own child still clinging to it. She snatched it up, her tears falling as she roared for her young. The tribe surged forward, but the humans stopped them, their weapons raised not at the predators, but at the cliffs above. The leaders shouted that they were surrounded. From the darkness of the cliffs eyes glowed cold, and merciless shapes shifted, tall and insect-like, with limbs sharp as blades, their bodies covered in armor that shimmered in the dim light. They hissed with voices like knives cutting stone, and the predators knew at once that these were not rival clans, these were not spirits, these were the shadow creatures of nightmare, the ones who had stolen their cubs. The predators raised their blades, ready to leap into battle, but again the humans called them to wait. The leader's voice cut through the fear. He said that to fight here would be death, for the enemy wanted them to fight in this canyon, where high cliffs would rain death upon them. He said the cubs were not here, only the trap. The predators growled with fury, but their elders saw the truth and held them back. His voice rough with rage, but steady with wisdom, he commanded his hunters to retreat, for their battle must be chosen, not given. The shadows hissed their disappointment, but did not attack. They had expected blind rage, but found restraint and cunning. Instead, the predators pulled back step by step, their eyes never leaving the cliffs. The humans backed with them, their weapons glowing ready. The canyon fell into silence once more, but now every heart knew the truth. The cubs were alive, yet hidden deeper in the dark, and the enemy was waiting for the moment to strike. When they returned to the valley, the tribe burned fires through the night, their anger hot, but their fear hotter. The humans met with the elder and spoke of plans. They would track the enemy not through baited trails, but through signals from the sky. They would find the true lair of the abductors and strike together. The elder growled his agreement, though his pride ached. His eyes carried the fire of a father who would save his young no matter the cost. And so the predators and humans stood side by side. Though trust was thin and suspicion sharp, they now shared one truth: the cubs were alive, but stolen into the grip of monsters. The signs of the trap had been revealed, and from this moment the hunt was no longer blind. A real war was about to begin. The fires in the Predator Valley burned through the long night, their flames licking at the sky, while the hunters sharpened claws, and the mothers whispered the names of their missing young. The humans kept their distance, standing watch on the cliffs, with eyes that never closed and ears that never rested. They saw the pain and the fury of the predators, and they understood it, for they had carried the same pain once on their own world, when children were lost to war and hunger and cruelty. At dawn the elder called the tribe together. Once more, his voice deep and heavy as stone, he growled that the signs were clear. The enemy had stolen their cubs and had tried to lead them into a trap, but the tribe had pulled back with wisdom, and now the path ahead was darker than ever. The hunters roared for blood, the mothers begged for speed, but the elder lifted his hand and silence fell across the circle. Then he turned his eyes to the humans and asked the question that weighed on every heart: why do you care? Why do you risk yourselves for young that are not your own? The leader of the humans stepped forward, his armor plain, his hands empty, his voice steady. He spoke of the vow of humanity. He spoke of the wars against slavers who had stolen children from other worlds. He told them of cages filled with young who cried for parents who never came. He told them of the vow sworn by every human, that no child would be abandoned no matter the species, no matter the world. The predators listened, their eyes narrowing, their claws twitching with distrust, yet something in the human voice burned with a fire that even they could not deny. A young predator warrior snarled that humans were weak, that their claws were soft, their fangs small, that they hid behind strange machines and strange weapons. But the elders silenced him. With a growl he said that weakness is not measured only in claws and fangs. He said that perhaps there is another kind of strength, one that comes not from rage, but from the will to protect. The tribe murmured, uneasy, their pride warring with the spark of respect that flickered in their hearts. The humans then showed their scanners and maps, their glowing screens, painting images of the forest and the canyons beyond. They pointed to strange signals deep within the mountain, signals too steady, too cold to be natural. The predators leaned close, their eyes widening as they saw the shapes of hidden structures carved into stone. The humans said this was where the abductors hid, this was where the cubs were caged. The predators roared in fury, their claws scraping the ground as they demanded to march at once, but the humans shook their heads. The leader of the humans explained that to charge now would be to fall into another trap. The abductors were clever. They built their lairs with walls of metal and with weapons hidden in the shadows. He said they must plan, they must strike with precision. He said they must fight as one. The predators growled, their rage rising again, but the elder nodded slowly. He said the tribe would not walk into death without thought. If humans had knowledge of the enemy, then that knowledge would guide them. Thus the uneasy alliance was forged, not of trust, not of friendship, but of need. The predators needed human wisdom and tools. The humans needed predator strength and fury. Together they would march into the dark and tear the young from the hands of monsters. That night the hunters of the tribe sat with the human soldiers around the fires. Though their eyes still burned with suspicion, they listened to the stories of other worlds. The humans spoke of battles fought in deserts of red sand and forests of black stone. They spoke of allies who once distrusted them, but later called them brothers. They spoke of children who were saved from cages and grew strong to rebuild their clans. The predators listened silent, their pride heavy, but their heart stirring with something strange, a flicker of hope. One predator mother leaned close to a human soldier, her voice shaking with sorrow. She asked why humans would care for her cubs. The soldier answered with words simple and sharp, because children are children, and no one has the right to take them. Her eyes filled with tears, and she whispered the name of her child into the night, as if passing it into human hands. At dawn the alliance was tested, for scouts returned from the mountains with news. The abductors were moving caravans through the canyon's, cages carried on crawling machines, pulled by strange beasts. The predators roared at the thought of their cubs trapped inside those cages. The humans reacted with cold focus. They moved to their maps and marked the paths. They said this was the chance to strike a caravan before it reached the lair. The predators wanted to attack with all their hunters at once, but the humans warned against such fury. They said the abductors expected large groups. They would be ready for it, but a small strike force could move silent and fast, cut the enemy apart before the alarm was raised. The elder listened, his claws tapping on stone, his eyes locked on the human leader. At last he growled his agreement. He chose his fiercest hunters to go with the human strike team. Together they would move through the canyons like shadows. The predators growled with rage at being told to wait, but the elder silenced them with a roar. He said, pride is nothing without young. Pride is nothing if the bloodline is broken. So it was that the humans and predators marched into the canyons, their steps echoing on stone, their breath steady, their hearts heavy with purpose. The walls rose high around them, the sky narrowed to a thin strip of blue, and the shadows grew thick with danger. Every sound carried for miles, every step felt like walking into the jaws of a beast. But they pressed on, their eyes sharp, their weapons ready. At last they saw the caravan crawling through the canyon, cages chained to metal beasts. Inside the cages small shapes moved, cubs crying in fear, their voices faint but sharp to predator ears. The hunters trembled with rage, their claws digging into the rock. The humans placed calming hands on them, whispering that patience would save more than fury. The predators growled low but obeyed. The enemy marched beside the caravan, tall insect-like creatures with armor that shimmered and blades for arms. They hissed commands, their black eyes scanning the canyon, but they did not see the hunters above. They did not see the humans. Waiting in silence, the leader gave the signal, and the strike began. From the cliffs the predators leapt, claws tearing into alien flesh, roars shaking the stone. From the sky the humans opened fire, their weapons cracking like thunder, cutting down the guards. Before they could scream, the caravan erupted in chaos, the abductors hissing and screeching as they fell one by one under the storm of claw and fire. The cages shook, the cubs cried, the predators slashed at the locks, while the humans covered them with fire. The enemy fought hard, their armor strong, their blades sharp, but the alliance held strong, predator fury and human steel moving as one. Within moments the caravan burned, the last of the abductors fell, and silence filled the canyon. The predators tore open the cages, and their cubs spilled out into their arms. The mothers wept, the fathers roared their joy, shaking the cliffs. The cubs clung to them trembling, yet alive. The humans stood back, watching with calm eyes, their weapons still ready, their faces grim but soft with relief. The elder looked at the humans, his eyes deep with something new, not trust, not yet, but respect. He growled that this battle was only the first, that the enemy was greater than this one caravan, that the true lair still waited in the mountains. The human leader nodded, his face hard with resolve. Together they would march again, for the fight was far from over. The uneasy alliance had been tested in fire and blood, and though suspicion still lingered, the predators now knew the truth. The humans were not prey, they were not rivals. They were something far stranger. They were protectors of children, even those not their own, and in that truth the bond between them began to grow. The canyon lay in ruins, the caravan destroyed, the abductors slain, and the cubs rescued, yet the fires of victory burned only for a short while, for the humans knew, and the elder knew, that this was only the edge of the storm. The true lair of the abductors still waited, hidden deeper in the mountains, built with walls of iron and shadows, with cages far greater than the few they had broken the night after the battle. The predators gathered with their cubs, held close, their voices mixing grief and joy. While the humans stood apart, their eyes turned to the sky, their minds heavy with what was still to come. The elder spoke to the tribe, his voice deep as thunder. He said the cubs were safe for now, but many more were still stolen, not only of their blood, but of other clans and other worlds. He told them that the fight had only begun, and that to stop now was to surrender their future. The hunters roared in agreement, their claws striking the stone, their rage and pride burning like fire. But then the elder raised his voice and said they would not march alone, they would march with the humans, and at those words the valley fell silent. The predators were proud beings. They had never walked beside outsiders. They had never shared war with another kind, yet they had seen what the humans could do. They had seen their fire and their calm. They had seen how humans moved with purpose, even in the jaws of a trap. Some growled with resentment, their pride sharp as claws, but others bowed their heads, for they knew the truth. Alone they would lose, together they had a chance. The humans met with the elder and his hunters in the great cave at the heart of the valley. The firelight painted their faces with shadow and flame. The leader of the humans spread maps across the stone floor, his voice calm, his words simple. He showed the signals from their machines, the strange pulses that came from deep in the mountains. He said this was no camp, this was a fortress, a place where many species had been stolen and caged. He warned them of walls high as cliffs, of weapons hidden in stone, of soldiers more cruel and endless than those in the caravan. The predators growled, their rage sharp, but their eyes stayed fixed on the maps. The elder asked the human leader what they would do, and the human answered with steady fire. He said they would not wait. They would not allow another caravan to pass. They would march into the void itself, into the fortress of the abductors. They would strike not with blind fury, but with purpose, with patience, with strength united. He said the cubs of many worlds waited for them, and they must be freed. The tribe howled their approval, their voices shaking the cave. The mothers wept with both fear and hope. The fathers raised their blades and swore oaths of blood. The humans nodded, their faces grim, but their eyes bright with the fire of the vow. Once more the uneasy alliance grew tighter, not in comfort, but in shared burden. When the night ended, the march began, humans and predators, side by side across the stone paths that wound into the mountains. The sky above was heavy with gray clouds, the wind sharp against their skin. The cubs, who had been rescued, were left behind in the care of the oldest and the weakest, who stayed in the valley. The warriors moved on, their hearts heavy with the memory of the cries from the cages, their eyes sharp for signs of the enemy. The path grew darker as they climbed, the air colder, the silence deeper. Then strange sounds drifted through the wind, low hums that rattled in the bones. The humans raised their scanners and said the fortress was near. Every hunter felt the weight of that sound, a sound not of earth or claw, but of machines that ate the air with their power. The predators growled and bared their fangs, But the humans lifted their hands, reminding them that silence was their shield until the time of strike. As night fell again, they reached the edge of a vast canyon that split the mountains wide. Across the chasm rose towers of black metal, sharp and cold, their tips glowing faint with alien fire. The fortress of the abductors pulsed with life, its walls alive with strange energy, gates and patrols moving in endless patterns, and within its heart, the humans said, were cages filled with young from across the stars. The predators trembled with rage, their claws digging deep into stone. Some wanted to leap across at once, to tear and to burn, but the elder growled that patience was their only hope. He turned to the humans and asked how to break such a fortress. The leader of the humans spoke with calm. He said they would move in shadows, strike at the gates with precision, open paths for the hunters to flood in, while the humans cut down the weapons that waited above. He said the abductors expected fear, but they would give them fury joined with purpose. So they prepared through the night, humans setting charges, predators sharpening claws and whispering prayers to their ancestors. Fires burned low as warriors shared quiet words, mothers whispering the names of their cubs, fathers vowing to return or die in the attempt. The humans sat together silent, their minds heavy with memory of other battles and other cries they had failed to stop. They would not fail this time. At dawn the attack began. The humans moved first, their small teams slipping into the shadows, planting charges along the gates, their rifles ready, their eyes cold as stone. The predators waited above the canyon, their muscles coiled, their roars held in their throats. The hum of the fortress grew louder, the air crackled with alien fire. Then the leader of the humans gave the signal, and the night exploded. The gates of black metal burst in fire, the towers shook with thunder. The humans opened fire from the shadows, their rifles blazing like storms of light. The predators roared, their fury breaking free as they leapt across the chasm, their claws tearing into alien steel, their fangs flashing as they crashed down upon the abductors. The battle was chaos. Insect-like creatures poured from the towers, their blades slicing through the air, their hissing voices rising in a storm of hate. But predator fury met them head on, claws rending armor, fangs tearing through limbs, while the humans cut down those that tried to strike. From above the fortress shook with the clash, the ground ran with sparks and blood. The cages within rattled as young voices cried for freedom. The humans pressed forward, their weapons carving paths through steel. The predators crashed through the gates, their roars shaking the mountains. Together they stormed the fortress, step by step, cut by cut, roar by roar. And as they moved deeper into the heart of the lair, they saw the truth. The cages stretched wide across the dark halls, not only predator cubs, but children of many species, eyes wide with fear, hands clutching bars too strong to break. The predators howled and raged, their voices shaking the halls. The humans pressed on, planting charges, cutting locks, smashing walls, until the cries of the young rose into the air, louder than the hissing of the abductors, louder than the hum of their machines, louder than the clash of war itself. The fortress began to crumble under fire and fury, yet still the abductors poured in endless waves, determined to hold their stolen prize. But the alliance did not falter. Predator claws and human steel cut through the storm, every strike, every shot fueled by the vow that no child would be left behind. Together they fought deeper and deeper into the void, each step closer to the cages, each breath closer to freedom. The abductors hissed and screamed, but for the first time they felt fear, for they faced not only hunters, not only soldiers, but protectors who would tear down walls of stone and steel for the lives of the young. The fortress shook, the mountains trembled, the void was filled with the roar of an alliance forged in fire and sorrow. And though the battle was far from over, one truth burned clear: the abductors had stolen the wrong children, for they had called forth the fury of predators and the unbreakable vow of humanity. The fortress shook with fire and thunder as predators and humans stormed its dark halls. The walls rang with the clash of steel and the hiss of alien voices. The abductors swarmed from every passage, their insect forms glistening with hard armor, their limbs cutting like blades, their black eyes burning with cruel hunger. Yet the predators met them with roars that shook the air, their claws tearing through chitin, their fangs sinking deep, while humans fought beside them, their rifles cracking like storms of lightning, their blades flashing in the dark. Together they carved a path through the endless tide. The abductors were many, their numbers pouring from shadowed tunnels like rivers of hate, their hiss rising high above the thunder of battle. They struck with blades sharp enough to split stone. They leapt with speed that blurred through the smoke. But predators were faster, their fury unchained their muscles, surging with the power of rage and grief. They slashed and tore and crushed every foe that stood in their way. Humans moved with focus and fire covering the predators. When the swarm grew too thick, burning holes in their ranks with disciplined volleys, every cry of pain from a trapped child drove them harder. Every scream from the cages behind the walls gave them strength. Deep inside the fortress, the abductors unleashed their machines, great towers of metal rising on many legs, spitting fire and beams of cold light that cut through stone. The predators roared in defiance, leaping onto the machines, their claws digging into iron, their bodies tearing through gears and pipes, while humans hurled charges that erupted in fire, blasting the towers into pieces. The fortress groaned under the strain, its walls trembling, its floor shaking, as if the mountains themselves feared the fury of this alliance. The elder of the predators fought at the front, his old body scarred, his claws still sharp, his roar leading his hunters as they crashed into the heart of the swarm. By his side, the human leader pressed forward, his eyes cold, his weapon blazing with endless fire. Together, they cut a path through the strongest of the abductors, their steps never faltering, their wills never breaking, each strike a promise, each roar a vow. The abductors hissed with rage and fear, for they had never seen prey fight as one. They had never seen hunters from different worlds stand shoulder to shoulder. Their traps broken, their machines destroyed. They screeched commands to one another, calling for reinforcements, calling for the fortress itself to crush these intruders. But the intruders did not stop. They moved deeper through the smoke and flamed, their every step a storm of fury. In the high towers, the abductors unleashed storms of arrows and beams, yet humans answered with fire, their rifles spitting light that shattered the enemy ranks, their charges bringing towers down in roaring collapse. Predators leapt into the falling stone, ripping the creatures apart before they could rise again. The air grew thick with smoke and blood, the ground slick with the ruin of the battle, but neither human nor predator gave ground. At last they reached the great hall of the fortress, a cavern of black stone and iron, where cages hung in endless rows, filled with young from countless species, their cries echoing through the air. The predators froze, their eyes burning as they saw their cubs clinging to the bars, their voices raw from crying. The humans felt their hearts twist with fury, for they saw not only predator young, but children of many worlds, wide-eyed and thin, their hope faint yet alive. The abductors hissed from every corner, filling the hall with their numbers, ready to defend their prize. The elder raised his claws high, his roar shaking the very walls. He called his hunters forward, and they surged into the hall like a wave of fury. The humans unleashed fire with precision, each shot burning through the enemy ranks. The abductors charged, their blades flashing, their hiss screaming, but the alliance held strong. Predator claws cut them down, human steel shot them through, and together they drove the swarm back step by step until the hall itself shook with the clash. The cages rattled as the children cried, their voices filling the air, their fear heavy, their hope rising. The predators fought harder, their fury doubled. The humans pressed closer, their fire endless. The abductors began to falter, their lines breaking, their hiss turning to shrieks of fear, yet their numbers still poured in from the tunnels like rivers without end. The human leader shouted orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. Teams split, moving to free the cages, while others held the line. The predators crashed against the locks with claws and blades, their muscles straining, their roars echoing as the bars bent and broke. The humans used their charges, blasting open cages one after another, until small hands reached out, until small eyes filled with light of hope as freedom came. The abductors saw their prize slipping away, their shrieks turning to madness. They unleashed their final weapon, a creature larger than the rest, armored like a mountain with limbs sharp as towers, its roar splitting the air. The predators froze for a heartbeat, but then the elder charged, his body battered, but his spirit blazing. He leapt onto the giant beast, his claws tearing at its armor. The human leader joined his fire, hammering into its joints together. They struck again and again until the armor cracked, until the monster screamed and fell, shaking the hall with its death. The sight broke the spirit of the abductors. They hissed and screeched, their ranks shattering. Some fled into the tunnels, others fought in vain. Cut down by the alliance, the hall fell into silence, broken only by the cries of freed children as they clung to their rescuers. The predators gathered their cubs, holding them close, their eyes with their voices trembling. The humans moved through the cages, guiding the young of other worlds to safety, their hands steady, their words calm, the vow of humanity fulfilled in every motion. The elder stood before the human leader, his chest heaving, his fur wet with blood, not all his own. He looked into the human eyes and growled with respect, He said the battle was not only for predators, it was for all children. He said the blood of many had been spilled, but the young lived, and that was the true victory. The human leader nodded, his face grim, but his eyes soft, for he knew the elder spoke truth. Yet even as the fires of battle dimmed, the humans warned that this war was not yet over. The fortress was broken, but the slavers had more ships across the stars, more lairs hidden in shadow, more cages waiting to be filled. The predators growled their rage. Still hot, they swore they would hunt the shadows. Wherever they fled, they swore they would never again allow their cubs to be taken. The humans swore with them their vow stronger than iron. Together they led the young from the ruins of the fortress, the sky above opening with the first light of dawn, the mountains echoing with the sound of voices no longer crying in fear, but rising in song of freedom. The predators walked with heads high, their cubs safe. At last the humans walked beside them, silent but proud, their vow once more fulfilled. The clash had ended in victory, but every heart knew the war was only beginning. The dawn rose slow and heavy over the mountains, its red light spilling across the broken fortress, where the cries of children had turned to quiet songs of freedom. Smoke rose from shattered towers, and the stone still trembled from the clash of fire and claw. Yet in the valley of silence there was life again. The predators carried their cubs in strong arms, their voices soft and trembling with relief, while the humans guided the young of other worlds with hands steady and calm, their vow burning in every step. The long march back to the valley began, the path winding down from the mountains across cliffs and rivers through forests that had watched the night filled with sorrow and the morning filled with victory. The predators walked with heads high, their cubs clinging close, their roars of joy echoing across the land. The humans walked beside them, silent but strong, their eyes scanning the shadows for signs of danger, their weapons ready, though their hearts longed only to see the children safe. The elder led the march, his steps heavy with age yet unbroken, his scars deep yet shining. With pride at his side walked the human leader, his gaze forward, his shoulders bearing the weight of memory and promise. Together they carried no flag, no banner, yet every step spoke louder than any symbol, for behind them marched an alliance born not from trust or comfort, but from fire and sorrow and the vow to protect the young. Along the way the predators began to see the humans with new eyes. They had once thought them soft, fragile creatures who relied only on strange machines, yet now they saw their fire, their steel, their calm in the face of endless foes. They saw humans fight not for blood, not for pride, but for children not their own, and this truth weighed heavy on predator hearts, for it was a strength they had never understood, a strength that cut deeper than any claw. The mothers whispered the names of their cubs in human ears. The fathers nodded in silent respect to the soldiers who had stood beside them. The young cubs looked up with wide eyes, not only at their own kind, but at the humans who had freed them, their small voices asking questions, their small hands reaching out without fear. The humans answered with gentle smiles and words simple enough to bridge the gap between worlds. The bond began to grow, not with speeches or oaths, but with the quiet truth of shared struggle. When at last the valley came into sight, a roar rose from those who had been left behind, the old, the weak, the cubs who had been rescued earlier. Their voices filled the air as they saw their kin return alive. The valley shook with joy, the fires blazed higher, the ground itself seemed to sing with relief. The predators gathered in circles, their cubs in the center, their claws raised in thanks to the sky, while the humans stood at the edge, their faces lit by fire, their hearts swelling though they spoke no word of pride. The elder stepped forward, raising his claws high, his voice rolling like thunder. He declared that the cubs had been taken by shadows, but returned by fire and steel. He declared that the tribe would remember not only their own courage, but the courage of the humans who had walked with them. He growled that the bloodline had survived, that the tribe would endure, but he added that survival had come because they had stood not alone but together. The predators roared their approval, their voices echoing across the cliffs, yet even in their pride, they turned their eyes to the humans with something more than suspicion, something deeper than respect. Though words of trust did not pass their lips, the silence spoke it well. The humans bowed their heads, their leader stepping forward, his voice quiet yet strong. He said the vow was fulfilled, the children were free, but he warned the war was not ended. The slavers would return, they always returned, and when they did, the predators must be ready. The elder answered with a growl that shook the ground. He said the tribe would no longer walk blind into shadows. They would no longer fight only with claws and rage. They had seen another kind of strength in the humans, a strength of patience and fire and unity, and they would learn it. The predators would never again allow their young to be stolen. They would rise as hunters of shadows, not prey of the void. The humans nodded their vow renewed in silence, for they knew the fight across the stars was endless, but no child would ever be left behind. That night the valley became a sea of fire, and song the predators feasted, their voices raised in chants that told the tale of the vanishing and the return. Their cubs danced around the flames, their laughter sharp and bright, cutting through the memory of sorrow. The humans sat among them, invited for the first time into the circle. Though they ate little, their eyes glowed with something rare, a warmth that came not from victory in battle, but from the sight of children safe and free. As the stars wheeled above, the elders sat beside the human leader, the two old warriors, sharing silence more powerful than words. The elder finally spoke, his voice low. He said, "Once he believed humans were weak, once he believed their presence in the valley was danger, but now he saw the truth. He saw protectors of children stronger than any claw." The human leader answered softly, saying, "Humans were not without weakness," saying they had failed before on other worlds, but each time they rose again. For each failure they swore anew never to turn away again. The elder growled approval, and the firelight flickered between them like the spark of a bond. The cubs slept at last, their small bodies curled in safety, their dreams filled not with cages, but with firelight and song. The predators watched them with eyes soft and fierce. The humans watched with quiet hearts heavy with memory, yet lightened by hope. The valley rested, yet knew the stars beyond still held shadows, still held enemies waiting, still held wars yet to be fought. But tonight in the valley the young were home, and that was victory enough. When the dawn came again, the humans prepared their ships for departure. Their duty called them to other skies, other cries waiting across the stars. The predators gathered to see them off, their roars of farewell echoing across the cliffs. The elder placed his claw on the arm of the human leader and growled that should the shadows return, the predators would fight beside humans. Without hesitation, the human leader placed his hand on the claw and answered that should the predators call for aid, humanity would answer, for the vow bound them forever. The ships rose into the sky, their engines humming like distant thunder. The cubs waved with small claws, their voices crying out not with fear, but with joy. The predators watched until the ships became only glimmers among the stars. Then they turned back to their valley stronger than before, united by fire and sorrow, and hope, their bloodline safe. Their pride remade, their eyes now open to a new truth. For they had seen the humans, though fragile in form, were unbreakable in spirit. They had seen that humanity was not a rival, not a shadow, but a light of fire that would burn against the dark of the void, of fire that would guard the young of every world from the cold claws of slavers and monsters. The predators would remember always that when their cubs returned, it was not only to the arms of their tribe, but also to the watchful eyes of humanity. And so the tale of the vanishing became the tale of the return, not only of predator cubs, but of hope itself. For in the darkest night, when children are taken, when shadows creep and silence grows, there are those who rise with fire in their hearts to guard the innocent. There are humans waiting in the stars, and their vow is unbreakable. No child shall be left behind.